Uh-oh.
Okay, we'll start with this. A recent social media post from Bill Haney that reads, "Thank you, DAZN Boxing, for turning up the heat and shutting down the false narratives of showbiz the adult, punch-drunk boxing, knockout boxing, southpaw, and others are trying to push with emasculating AI memes, discrediting fighters. 20 years of skills, hard work, and a warrior's mentality got us here, and no fake stories from sideline critics can take that away."
Emasculating AI memes.
You may have seen one or two floating around on Twitter, otherwise known as X, that as Devin Haney's stock continues to plummet, he's become the butt of most every joke. Bill is seemingly putting on blast all those content creators that are a party to it, saying, "All new channels, hit me up, let's get you booming."
What does that mean?
It sounds a lot like Bill is looking to recruit YouTubers, content creators, to service as paid promotion for his son. For a long time now, it was suspected that Bill was giving cash incentives to some content creators to talk about his son in a positive light and work as another arm of promotion.
So he looks to keep doing that.
And so I suspect that Bill Haney is not the only one that does this. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point they were doing this for Gervonta Davis or Ryan Garcia or just some other boxers.
Like when Ryan Garcia was going through that whole doping fiasco and how some so vehemently defended him when he was so obviously guilty, it's likely because they were being paid to do so.
So that seems to be the case here, but I don't think that manufacturing favor via content creators will be the solution for Devin. The solution is actually a lot more simple. Just get out there and fight. Get out there and put distance between yourself and the performance in the Ryan Garcia fight. Help people forget, because the way it is, the last time they saw Devin was in the Ryan Garcia fight, and allowed to simmer, allowed to fester, that's their last memory of him. You know, the Joseph Parker versus Joe Joyce fight feels like ancient history because it was several fights ago, and a lot has happened since then. That Joe Joyce didn't take a year and a day to get back out there, get back in the winner's bracket, and make people forget. And he has made people forget with a few smaller victories over lower tier opponents and more name brand opponents in Deontay Wilder and Zhilei Zhang. Now he's going into a big fight with Daniel Dubois, and it's like the Joe Joyce fight never happened.
He put distance between himself and the performance in the Joe Joyce fight. Well, that's what Devin has to do now.
There was an opportunity to return to action at least one more time before this year was out. I believe it was for a Liam Botto fight that by now we all know Devin passed on. He should have took it.
Devin is still an unbeaten fighter as a result of the Ryan Garcia fight being ruled a no contest, but it very much still feels like he's on the rebound, like he's on the bounce.
And what Bill Haney means to do is achieve favor, get back in their good graces by essentially buying content creators, what is tantamount to putting a band-aid over a bullet wound. Devin can survive this, but not doing that.
This guy strays so far from the goddamn point. And what brought us all here in the first place? It's the boxing. Just get back to boxing.
That's how you make them forget. That's how you move on. Like after a bad breakup, you never fully recover until you jump into a new slice of pussy.
Pussy.
Everything Devin's been doing in the subsequent weeks and months that have followed the Ryan Garcia fight has done more to make him look bad.
It's made things worse.
He's just got to get out there and fight. And to get out there and fight, he He needs to be real. He needs to be reasonable and honest with himself.
Might need to take shorter money to keep a more active schedule, but what are your alternatives? Inactivity?
It's not actually an alternative. Nothing is not a substitute for something.
Gotta get out there and fight, and it's as simple as that.
Men's Cruiserweight news. Former champion Chris Smith rates Zurdo Ramirez versus Jai Opetaia as a 50-50 fight. One of the finest fights that could be made in 2025 would be a Cruiserweight unification contest between WBA and WBO champion Zurdo Ramirez and IBF ruler Jai Opetaia. Opetaia is back in action in Australia next month on the 8th against David Naika, while Ramirez is coming off an impressive November win over Chris Smith, in which he added the WBO title to his WBA belt. Smith, now hoping to take the WBC route in 2025, said he believes a Ramirez versus Opetaia matchup could be competitive.
It's an interesting little nugget there. That he's going the WBC route. We'll talk about that.
I don't know, Smith said when asked who might win. I think it depends on the first few rounds. He's a very clever fighter, Zurdo. I know he's much more clever in there than you probably realize at times, but Opetaia is very good technically, and he's got good feet. And I think you need good feet to beat Zurdo. I think fast feet and keeping your shape and stuff like that is important. It's how he beat him, with his feet. Between the two champions, Ramirez has the only professional loss, and that is to the excellent light heavyweight Dimitri Bivol. Smith admires Bivol, while at the same time believing Opetaia versus Ramirez would strategically be a different fight. I don't think Opetaia is the same in terms of the way he does it, said Smith. I think he does switch off at times after he punches. Opetaia, in terms of he looks for that big shot, that big backhand, but it's a 50-50 fight for sure, I think. I'd love to see it. Not often you say that about two southpaws either, but I'd love to see it.
So let's talk about Chris Smith going the WBC route. A couple of weeks ago, I remember Mauricio Suleiman saying something along the lines of, Chris could be fast-tracked to a world title shot.
We know that since then, Noel Mikhailian has been relegated to a champion in recess, and Badu Jack has been reinstated as full champion. He's under orders to fight his mandatory challenger, Ryan Rositsky.
Where does Chris fit into that picture?
Well, unlike those two guys, Chris does have some money behind him. He boxes under the Boxer banner, and he boxes on Sky Sports, as opposed to Ryan Rositsky, who's not with a major promoter, and neither is Badu Jack. Is it possible that Chris Smith and those two fighters can reach some kind of an arrangement where he fights for the WBC title next and Ryan Rositsky stands down? Or does he just wait in line, wait for his turn, and fight the winner? Neither would surprise me.
As far as Chris.
As far as a Zurdo Ramirez versus Jai Opetaia fight, I do view it as a closer fight now than I used to. I used to think that Jai Opetaia would steamroll Zurdo. I used to think that he would walk right through him.
I'm not so sure now.
Part of the reason that Jai Opetaia is widely regarded as the best in show in the Cruiserweight division, it's not just because he's got a big punch, it's because he can actually move, he can actually maneuver, he can box. And up until recently,
seemed like he was one of the few guys in that division with legs.
Enter Zurdo Ramirez, who's done a full 180 from the fighter that he used to be and how he goes about fighting a fight. He went from a mid-range to inside volume puncher to a full-on boxer, mover.
Just saying a lot, because pressure fighters seldom ever change. They seldom ever break character. He has.
So now what you've got are two crafty southpaws, two guys who can move, who can maneuver. One punches a lot harder than the other, I think. I'd give the edge in power to Jai.
But Zurdo ain't pillow-fisted. I saw the images of Chris Smith after the Zurdo Ramirez fight, and he was banged up. He was banged up real bad. Eyes all busted up. I read something about broken ribs.
I don't think Zurdo punches as hard as Jai Opetaia, but he punches well enough that he got Chris Smith's respect.
Inside game.
On the inside, Zurdo has the edge. He's a better, more experienced mid-range to inside fighter than Jai Opetaia. Jai is actually vulnerable there. That's how Mayris Briedis was able to do so much damage in their two fights.
In the phone booth, Zurdo's got the edge. Cardio.
The better engine. I think you have to give that edge to Zurdo Ramirez, too, because he's got more fights, more rounds in the bank. That's more times that he's fought in 12-rounders. That's more times that he's gone the distance, whereas Jai, to my knowledge, he's only ever gone the distance 2 times in a 12-rounder. Both times were with Mayris Briedis, and both times Jai gassed out.
It's an important detail.
Not gonna make any bold presuppositions, I'm just saying that Zurdo stands a better chance in that fight than I originally thought, because he does have more rounds in the bank than Jai Opetaia. He's got better cardio, and he can move around a bit too.
Better on the inside.
Though before it becomes about Zurdo Ramirez versus Jai Opetaia, Zurdo has to make it through former champion Uniel Dorticos. The WBA said at their recent annual convention that they will order the Cruiserweight champion Zurdo Ramirez to face his mandatory challenger, Uniel Dorticos. Uniel has been in the queue to challenge for the WBA title for at least a year now, as far back as when Arsene Goulamarian had the belt, and he hasn't gotten his opportunity yet.
It's time.
So now Zurdo's on the hook, and he's got a deal with him. Uniel Dorticos, otherwise known as El Keo Doctor, a remnant of the previous era of cruiserweights, one of the more dangerous ones, with a knockout punch.
Though he does have his limitations.
Uniel Dorticos, he's one of these guys with really long arms, and when he can get full extension on the punch, he can generate dangerous power, devastating power, but mid-range to inside, he can be smothered. That's how Murat Gassiev beat him.
Catching and countering, mid-range to inside, tucked behind a peekaboo guard.
We already know that Zurdo Ramirez is a talented inside fighter.
Down at 168 and 175, that's what he was. A pressure guy.
So what he's going to have to do to make it past Uniel is crowd him mid-range to inside. Don't give him room to throw. Don't give him room to work to get full extension on the arm and generate that power.
You gotta crowd him, push him back.
Smother him, going about fighting the fight the way that you used to.
That's how you do it.
That's how Gassiev did it. That's how Zurdo's got to do it if and when the time comes, and I think we're very close to an announcement being made. We have to see how Zurdo makes out. If he can go back to being a bit more of the Zurdo that he used to be, he can win this fight and move into that Jai Opetaia unification match.
Which, as stated, I do think it's a closer fight than I originally thought.
I used to think Jai Opetaia would steamroll Zurdo, walk right through him. Now, I'm not so sure. Finally, in men's heavyweight news, revitalized Lawrence Okolie could return in March after first round KO. Would make sense, he didn't have a lot of time out there. Might as well get him another fight in a jiffy. March, yeah. I was really surprised when he came to me. Just how little did he do? He's done everything we've asked and it's paid off. I wanted his mindset to be someone at heavyweight. Stop blaming making weight for poor performances. No excuses now, so go in there, let the right hand go, and show the fans and critics what we're seeing in the gym week in and week out. Okolie won the WBO Cruiserweight title against then-champion Krzysztof Glowacki in March of 2021 and successfully made a trio of defenses before losing it to Chris Billum-Smith last May, after which he moved up in weight and knocked out Lukas Rozensky inside of 1 round, 12 months later to win the WBC Bridgerweight title. Having flirted with a heavyweight move for several years and unsatisfied by criticism, boxing in a newly launched weight class only recognized by the WBC, described as Super Cruiser, the Hackney man belatedly made the plunge to join the sport's most glamorous division. After all, he sparred a who's who of heavyweights, established stars and rising prospects, including 11-0 Moses Italma. On the topic of an exciting talent who turns 20 this weekend, Gallagher likes what he's seen over the past year. Frank Warren told me how good he was a year ago. He's since changed trainers and is with Ben Davison now, but is a confident kid taking everything in stride. There's an air of expectancy around him that the inevitable will happen. Just gotta keep his mindset straight. Still a baby, he's hungry. Lawrence sparred him and said he can whack. So yeah, he's special. Some fans were quick to ridicule Okolie's fighting shape and suspect conditioning levels against Muhammad, only previously seeing him box at the 200-pound limit before last summer. He's gained 60 pounds, not all of it muscle. While the aesthetics need some work, Lawrence looks more comfortable and stressed the all-or-nothing jeopardy will produce more action too. Last month he praised Gallagher for giving him the mental freedom to not overthink as much, instead absorbing information before executing a game plan. Being an underdog against more established names is an unfamiliar concept he's relishing, while becoming a 3-weight world champion is amongst aspirations for the 32-year-old in his physical peak now, though you'd never know it looking at his spare tire.
Fact!
Doesn't get mentioned enough that Lawrence Okolie is a 2-division champion. He was WBO champion at Cruiser, WBC champion at Bridger, and if he becomes a heavyweight champion,
Pound-for-pound conversations are in order. As strange as that might sound, Lawrence Okolie is not a fighter that is often talked about in that context, but if he wins a belt at heavyweight,
you gotta give him his just due. Joe Gallagher told Boxing News, Lawrence didn't go the distance, but he won. He's doing what we've asked. 2 first-round knockouts, and if you compare last year December to tonight, he's here bouncing around, now number 4 with the WBC, watching opposition and will be ready for the big fights after March or April time. Number 2 ranked WBC contender Agit Kabayel will box Zile Zhang on a stacked February 22nd bill in Riyadh. With those rankings set to update again next month after the number 1 Fury suffered a second successive defeat to Usyk, Okolie has been previously linked with names like Dillian Whyte, Michael Hunter, but whatever ultimate decision, it's clear he needs another genuine step up before venturing towards the deep end.
They mentioned Michael Hunter, who, believe it or not, actually boxed 3 times this year. Very low on the radar.
But he's kept busy, he's kept active, he's racked up a string of victories, and if he's in the running for a Lawrence Okolie fight, he'll be ready.
He has another fight on schedule for early next year in February in Vegas against an opponent that is yet to be announced.
That's too quick a turnaround for a March fight date against Lawrence, but maybe in April. Maybe they could do that. They also mentioned Dillian Whyte, who was in action a little over a week ago opposite the ring Ebenezer Tete.
Bigger fight with a bigger name, bigger money.
You can definitely sell that one in London, but they need to incentivize the fight for Dillian Whyte. At his age, he's in it for the big bucks, so that's what they have to offer him. Frank and George and Lawrence, you have to make it worth his while.
He's not going to take that fight on the cheap.
For what they're trying to do with Lawrence Okolie, and what they're trying to build him into and get him away from, because Lawrence Okolie's fights are not often described as being fan-friendly, they've got to break that stigma, and they can do that by making an investment in a Dillian Whyte fight. It's going to cost them.
That's a winnable fight.
It's nothing against Dillian Whyte, but I really don't know how much more he has left to give the sport of boxing based on how he looked with Ebenezer Tete. Good enough to beat that guy and make it past him, but step him up.
It's a winnable fight for Lawrence Okolie.
I think that's the direction they should go in because the world title picture is all jammed up right now. There are mandatories already in the queue and mandatories that are set to be crowned.
The next best thing for Lawrence is continuing to make his bones as a heavyweight against a familiar face. Dillian Whyte would be ideal.